Fantastic. Just wait for the light to come on. There we go. We are now being recorded. Great. So this is the fourth accountability meeting since I was elected in May last year. Very nearly a year ago. The election was on the 8th of May last year. And clearly it's the meeting in which I carry out my statutory duty to hold the constabulary to account. And it is a meeting held in public, albeit on this occasion virtually. The meeting was previously due to be held on the 26th of April, but circumstances did require a short postponement. So I'm very grateful to everyone for enabling that through your diaries and for being here to support today. Once again, we are meeting virtually. I did say in my introduction last time that I hope that this meeting might be in person. And I would like to put on record my intent that the next meeting will be in person. And we will look for a venue accordingly. And hopefully everyone's aware we are being recorded. That recording is being streamed live and it will also be available on YouTube after the meeting. So without further ado, let's move on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any on your side, Paul?
Yes, we do, Commissioner. So Eamon Bridger, sorry, I've stood down given the agenda. None of the areas are from his side of the business. Also, so you're aware, I've invited Inspector Dave Burke along today. It's Dave's first day as my staff officer, taking over from Chris Banks. So with your consent, Dave would just like to listen in as part of the sort of getting up to speed with the role.
Yeah, absolutely delighted. Welcome, David. Welcome to the Madhouse.
Thank you.
Mark, anyone not present from our side?
Yes, we have
Gavin,
two.
I think I'm aware of.
Two apologies, Sharon Lister and Gavin Thompson.
Yeah, of course. Good. Moving swiftly on then, item 2, declarations of personal and/or prejudicial interest. Is there anything that anyone needs to declare? I see lots of negative nods. I see no hands going up. So no declarations. We'll move on then to item 3, which are the minutes of the last meeting, which took place on the 26th of January this year. Are there any issues that anyone wishes to raise about the minutes? Again, I see lots of negative nods and no hands going up, so we can accept the minutes as stated. Fantastic. Item 4, questions from the public. My office received 8 submissions from the public, and I've added one more question as a result of correspondence and questions I received over the weekend, courtesy of the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday article. We'll come to that in a moment. Of the 8 originally received, 2 requested specific facts and figures, so I've treated those as freedom of information requests. One was asking for a breakdown of the numbers of police officers in each rank, and the others for the numbers of cyclists prosecuted for offences. So, as I say, we'll give factual answers through the freedom of information mechanism for those. A third member of the public asked specifically to speak to me about what can be done to help the police tackle knife crime. And given that it was a request to speak to me, I thought that would be more appropriate to take in my next time to talk session. So we'll do that accordingly. So there are therefore 5 submissions still to be dealt with this afternoon. The first one is about police resources and is in 2 parts. First, how many officers was Norfolk Constabulary allocated as part of the government's police uplift programme, as part of the 20,000 new officers that the Prime Minister has promised? And the second part asked about the rationale for the level of roads policing in Norfolk and whether there were enough officers allocated to the task. So, Chief, I don't know if you want to take that or pass it to your staff, but perhaps if you would like to lead.
No, I think I'm going to lead on all of the questions today, Commissioner. So part 1, Norfolk Constabulary's allocation of the 20,000 uplift is 224 officers. You'll be aware, though, that all forces were required to allocate a proportion of those officers to their respective regional organised crime units. So in our case, 26 of the 224 will be going to the Eastern Region Organised Crime Unit, leaving the rest here for local allocation. But we recruit all of the 224. So on behalf of URSU, the allocation of that over the 3-year programme is 67 in year 1, and then and same in year 2 and 90 in year 3. That said, we have accelerated our recruitment, and numbers in the organisation go up and down according to retirements, amongst other things, but we project that by the end of July we will have fully recruited all of our additional officers provided to us through uplift. So so hopefully that answers the first part of the questioning. If I just pause at that point, should you wish to make any supplementary?
That's grand in terms of the answer to the question. If I could have just asked one supplementary, which is, we talk very much about officers. We haven't touched on police staff, but presumably there's a need for a balanced capability because more officers would logically require more staff to support them. I just wondered if you'd like to comment on that side of the coin as well.
Yes, of course. So the Home Office did recognise that very issue. You know, the more officers you employ, the more infrastructure that you need, whether it be duties planners, whether it be mechanics to provide more vehicles, etc. The early years of uplift funding came with an enhanced level of funding per officer, so that the constabulary could recruit the staff and purchase the kit that was needed to get those officers on the road. Locally in Norfolk, that has seen us employ extra staff in areas such as the resource management unit, mechanics, a significant investment in our learning and development department, and indeed the development of our new training centre at Heverset Old Hall School have all been in part funded through the uplift monies. So yes, we have increased our infrastructure in terms of number of staff to enable that to take place.
Graham, thank you. Which leaves part 2 of the original question.
So this related, sorry, Commissioner, can you repeat the second part then, please?
Yes, it's the second part was the rationale for the level of roads policing in Norfolk.
Yes, of course.
And asked whether there were enough officers available for the task.
Well, the reality of policing is I don't think that we'll ever have sufficient resource to address all of the demands that are asked of us. So we are regularly prioritising where we put our officers, and in the case of roads policing, we rely heavily on data relating to road collisions, volumes, location and causation of road collisions, which helps us to determine the number that are required to best ensure the safety of our roads. And you'll be aware that this very topic was a key point of discussion at the road safety conference you and I attended only a couple of weeks ago. What I would say about roads policing is this: it's that it is not solely through the deployment of police officers that you deliver road safety. Road safety is brought about through better road design, through education campaigns, and also through our camera enforcement teams funded by the Road Casualty Reduction Partnership. So am I satisfied that we've got enough roads policing officers deployed? Yes, I am, but only because they're part of a broad range of tactics that we use to deliver road safety. All of that being said, of course, we still know that there is a number of fatal collisions on our roads every year, a number that is always higher than we would wish it to be. And we are continually reviewing our data so that should I ever believe that we need to deploy more officers into this area, then we will do so. At the moment, set against other competing demands, I think we've got the number about where it needs to be.
Grant, thank you. Let me move on then to the second question, which came from a Norwich resident who was asking about policing on Prince of Wales Road for the nighttime economy, and asked about the rationale of reducing the police public order presence in the early hours of the morning. He particularly mentions 5 o'clock in the morning because the resident noted that they still see issues continuing at that time of the morning.
Well, in many respects, Commissioner, similar to the situation with roads policing, the numbers that we deploy into all areas of nighttime economy, not just Norwich, but all areas of nighttime economy is an assessment of risk, and it compares that risk with other policing matters that we could turn our attention towards. On a typical Saturday night in Norwich, we'll deploy, and this is before, and this is excluding specials who supplement. But on a typical Saturday night, we'll deploy 27 or so officers to policing predominantly one street, or certainly one zone, and that's a significant proportion of our resource. How long those officers stay on that street for is determined by an inspector who oversees that policing operation every Saturday or Friday night, whatever the case may be. If we get to 5 in the morning and those officers would be better deployed somewhere else because of the dynamic nature of the information that we receive, we will do that. If they need to stay beyond 5 a.m, then we will do that. So there's no hard and fast rule as to when the teams stand down. The vast majority of the premises in the nighttime economy are shut by 4 a.m. and it's actually primarily takeaway and food outlets that stay later beyond that time. It's fair to say that in terms of demands placed upon policing, some of those establishments have a disproportionate impact on our demand. So to sum up, we do put a significant amount of resource in. I don't think that we've seen a reduction. The only time when we've really had a reduction was during the course of the pandemic. And it was during that pandemic when we truly saw the impact that the nighttime economy has on us, because when you took it away, you truly saw that what we didn't need to deploy on a Friday and Saturday night. I think moving forwards for us, it's important that we continue with the strong relationships that we have with district councils across the county, so that rather than having to police problems in our nighttime economy, we use the mechanisms available to us through the Licensing Act to better ensure that those problems don't occur in the first place. Because, Commissioner, if I was honest, I would rather use those 28 officers to provide visible patrols during daytime hours when a broader section of the population would see them, rather than just the numbers who happen to see them at 4 or 5 a.m. in places such as Prince of Wales Road.
No, that's very clear, thank you. I don't have a supplementary on that. Let me go on to the third question. I don't know the geography of the questioner, but the question is about visible policing. Comes in 3 parts. What is the plan to staff front desks in police stations around Norfolk? The questioner comments that these are regarded as safe places to go, especially for vulnerable women. The second part is, what should someone do if they're out and feel unsafe? And the third part asks what the police are doing to improve police presence and make people feel safer. I don't have a gender for the questioner, but I'm assuming that the questioner is female.
Okay, thank you. So if I start with our front counters, first of all, we have a public inquiry office facility at Great Yarmouth, Norwich and King's Lynn police stations. The opening times are available on our website, but effectively Monday to Wednesday 9 AM to 5 PM, Thursday to Saturday 9 AM to 6 PM, and they are closed on a Sunday. We also have a public inquiry office at police headquarters at Wyndham, which is open on a Monday to Friday basis from 7 AM to 6 PM. All of our public inquiry offices are closed on bank holidays. There is no plans to change the opening hours of any of our public inquiry offices. We have previously carried out reviews of our public inquiry office function, which did lead to reductions in opening times. That was after a significant amount of analysis into the number of the amount of footfall and visitors, and the footfall into many of our outlying public inquiry offices was incredibly low. At the three main locations, a significant proportion of the footfall relates to persons who may be answering bail for suspects asked to return to the police station linked to a crime that's being investigated. The number, I guess, of what I would call spontaneous callers, even into our offices which are open, is very low. But nonetheless, to reiterate, we have no plans to review our existing structure. Yes, I can see how they would be considered a place of safety for anyone who may well feel at risk. What I would say is outside the majority of our police stations, we do have a yellow phone, which, should anyone find themselves at a public inquiry office where there is no one in, there is a direct line into our control room, so that officers can be deployed. And typically, officers will still be inside the police stations should anyone arrive at those locations looking for a place of safety. You asked, what should someone do if they're out and about and feel unsafe? Well, if there's an immediate concern for safety, then 999 is the most immediate response that we can provide. We advise someone to do that if they're in immediate danger, if a crime is in progress, or if they need help from the police immediately. Thinking beyond 999, though, of course, I'd reiterate that Norfolk is a safe county, but there are many places of safety where people can go, or routes to secure safety, potentially booking taxis through known and trusted providers, using open restaurants, open communal public areas. Other advice I would suggest would be staying in well-lit areas, keeping valuables hidden, and just avoiding hostile situations. However, most important to say is that we recognise that policing has a very, very significant role to play here, in ensuring that people feel safe by us keeping a good control on crime levels, and through regular patrol, and that's what we will continue to do. Which links on to the final part of your question, is what are we doing to improve feelings of safety? One of our main initiatives in this area was the launch of Street Safe. Commissioner, you'll be familiar with the product, but for those who might be listening in, I'll give a brief summary.
Yes, please.
Street Safe is a website where anyone can go. If they simply Google Street Safe or any search engine, type in Street Safe, It will take them to a website run by police.uk. On that website, quite simply, there is a map where anyone can click areas of the county where they do not feel safe. There'll be a few supplementary questions as to why the individual does not feel safe. The constabulary is then gathering all of that data, and that is informing where our officers are patrolling on a daily basis. It's also providing us with the information that we can share with other partners to tackle the reasons why people will call that they don't feel safe. Quite often that's environmental issues such as street lighting, graffiti, boarded up shops. So we're sharing that data with partners as well. We have carried out a significant number of patrols as a result of the information provided to us, and I think it's been a really effective way of policing, ensuring that our proactive activities directed in the areas where residents of the county feel least safe. We're committed to keeping our street safe patrols going over the coming months, and think it's been a successful scheme.
Thank you. Yeah, and on your last point, I noted when I attended a SNAP meeting in Yarmouth that most of the areas put street safe as their #1 priority because they liked the system and the patrols that it attracts. So that is definitely a success from the feedback I'm receiving.
Yes, I mean, we're pleased with how it's going. And of course, on top of that, we do still review our own data, whether it be reports of antisocial behaviour or crime-related data. We still do review our own information to determine where we go and when. But increasingly, it's that feedback from the public that's driving the proactive time of officers.
Yeah. Takes me to the fourth question I've got. It's a Downham Market resident who asks a fairly specific question about speeding motorists, drug driving and antisocial behaviour. Now, I know that the specific question could be referred to the local neighbourhood team, but for the purposes of giving general advice, what would you encourage people to do when they have issues like this that they wish to discuss with the police?
I will, as a matter of course, indeed refer this matter to the local policing team in Downham Market. Should anyone in that area or indeed anywhere else in the county have any issues that they wish to report to us, including persistent speeding, I would encourage them, ideally via our website, to enter their postcode, which will provide them with the details of who their local neighbourhood policing team is. We'll provide the contact details, and they can send a report through to them, setting out exactly what their challenges are, and the neighbourhood policing team will get back to them and see if they can solve the issues for them, or signpost them to the right people that can. With regards to speeding, I note that Downham Market currently doesn't have a community speed watch team. I would encourage anyone who gets in contact with us about the topic of speeding to see if they'd be interested in setting one up in their own community. We know that they have a big impact on speeding behaviour, so it's something that I would encourage and them to undertake. We have also, important to say in and around driving matters, one of our Operation Moonshot teams, that's our ANPR team, is based out of Downham Market Police Station and have been very active in and around the Downham Market area, dealing with all sorts of road-related offending. Indeed, in the last 12 months, they've arrested 57 drug drivers in and around the Downham Market area, which does show a considerable amount of proactivity, addressing, I hope, the issues that have been raised by the person who submitted this question to you. So, in short, we're active in the area. We've got a commitment to be visible in the area, but if there's any additional concerns that the person asking the question has, then via our website they can get in direct contact with the local policing team.
And as a very brief supplementary, the website is clearly signposts to where you can find the local community contact details.
Yes, yes, just type in your postcode on the front page of the website, and that will take you to the relevant team.
Thank you. Which brings me to the fifth and last of the questions that sort of come in from individual members of the public. This one from a Kings Lynn resident who's concerned about the increase in the number of mini motorcycles using paths and cycleways and thereby causing a danger. Is there anything we can do to halt and deal with this?
The local policing team are also themselves aware of increased use of these mini motos in and around the town. For that reason, an operation has commenced to deal with these matters, and the team are using reports from the public to target patrols into the relevant locations, and they are being supported by the roads policing team. We are dealing with offences when identified, and where powers allow, seizing the equipment so that it cannot be used again in an antisocial manner. We'd encourage report of any instances either through 101 or again through reporting on our website, ideally. If there's an imminent safety issue, 999 might also be appropriate. But we are taking this matter forward as a local priority, and we will deal with issues robustly because we do understand and appreciate the antisocial behaviour that can sometimes be associated with these vehicles.
Grand, thank you. I haven't got anything else on that. Those are the 5 submissions from the public. The additional question is sort of an amalgam of a lot of questions I got over the weekend and refers to the article in the Mail on Sunday. And I wondered if you could comment on how the article came to be written. Is the particular item they base their story on the totality of what's on the internet? And the particular question I've been asked is whether Norfolk Tax and Precept Payers paid for the commissioning and development of that page.
Happy to provide an update. The answer to the very last question, first of all, is we have not paid a penny for any of the products concerned in this report. But let me start from the beginning. The Constabulary's Freedom of Information Act team received a question from a journalist which set out a wide number of questions for the constabulary to answer. I believe this might have been sent to other police forces as well. The question had many limbs to it, but in short, it asked for materials that had been provided to officers so that they could brief themselves on a number of issues related to sexuality and gender. The constabulary sent a response to that Freedom of Information Act request, as we are required to do. We probably receive circa 25 Freedom of Information Act requests per week, a high number, so high in fact that we need a dedicated team of paid staff to service those FOI requests. The day before the report appeared in the paper, the constabulary was approached again by the journalist asking for comment. We again have regular contact from journalists, and we try to prioritise urgent matters. In the short period of time between us being contacted and the article going to print, there was no realistic opportunity for us to provide any comment, not least because on a busy bank holiday weekend, we did not think that it was an urgent matter that required the deployment of frontline staff dealing with other significant issues in the county to deal with this Freedom of Information Act response. So we declined to comment because we did not have time to do so. The newspaper article was then run, as you would have seen over the weekend, and it made reference to a product that is amongst the thousands of other products that are on our internal intranet site. The product concerned is I guess I would best describe it as a guide for staff to help them understand the growing number of terms associated with gender and sexuality in the modern age. It was simply put on one of the less frequently visited pages of our intranet site. I think it first went on there in January. It has not been given to all officers as a form of training. There has been no requirement for officers to access the page, and there has been no briefing of officers on the content of the page. It is simply there as a guide should anyone find themselves wanting to better understand, enhance their understanding in this area. The product itself was downloaded for no cost off the internet and posted on our website in January. I would suggest that the costs associated with dealing with the Freedom of Information Act request far outweigh the costs associated with the few seconds that it would have taken to upload that document onto our intranet site. And I can report that the number of times that document has been looked at by officers in the constabulary is incredibly low. I hesitate at this stage because I don't know, Commissioner, if I've missed any of your questions out there, but I trust that provides a good summary of where we find ourselves today.
No, I think you've covered the whole spectrum of the question. I mean, I make the assumption that this is basically a library of information based on the fact that individual officers, particularly as we move to a younger, less experienced force, don't have the wisdom or the experience to answer every single question they face in a day, and they need a very quick go-to point of reference to find information that's beyond that experience and knowledge, and therefore it's perfectly reasonable for it to be there. And the Mail on Sundays exclusive is perhaps not as helpful as it purports to be.
Yes, so our intranet site is full of guidance for officers on the many topics associated with policing, predominantly crime and predominantly procedurally how to deal with crime. But our community safety team saw this document and thought that it would be a helpful reference guide. As you set out, Commissioner, should an officer or member of staff at some point in the future feel that they need some information in this area of business, it is no more than that, and it is one of thousands of documents on our intranet site.
Yeah, grand. Thank you for that. Good. Well, that completes item 4, questions from the public. Unless there are any other points that anyone wants to raise on any of those from the floor, I'll move swiftly on to item 5, which is good stewardship of taxpayers' money. As last time, this is the first of 3 reports set against actually the previous police and crime plan. That plan remained in effect until the 30th of March, when of course it was replaced by my plan. But the following 3 reports are the last reports that we presented against that old plan. And the report on good stewardship of taxpayers' money begins, I think, at page 13. Do you want to say anything on that, Paul, or bring in anyone else to talk on the report before we go to questions?
So, Commissioner, I'm going to ask Peter to talk to this agenda item, please, and I think he'll give a very brief summary and then to any questions you might have. So, Peter, if I can pass to you, please.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Commissioner. So I'll start with the budget report, which was provided with the papers. The budget report covers the year-end forecast based at the end of February. The constabulary is forecasting an underspend of 573,000, which is 0.28% of the net revenue budget. There are two main areas of underspending, the first of which is pay-related costs, primarily through staff vacancies, and that's outlined in paragraph 3.2. And the second is the over-recovery of income outlined in paragraph 3.8, and mainly from mutual aid, in particular the attendance of officers at COP26 in Glasgow and G7 in Cornwall, plus other events where we provide mutual aid. The savings target of 4 million will be met again, so that does demonstrate the efficiency of the constabulary in achieving that £4 million worth of savings, and that's outlined in paragraph 4.1. Of note, and probably the main difference in terms of the previous report that we've submitted to this meeting, the capital programme has seen an increase in the forecast slippage of schemes into the new financial year, which we are now in, and the slippage has increased to about 5.3 million. We previously reported the Broadland Gate construction scheme that we were reprofiling that once the contract had been awarded, and that would resulted in slippage of about 2.8 million into this financial year. In addition to that, we have seen an increase in lead-in times for vehicles arising from exiting the EU and the pandemic, and latterly the conflict in Ukraine, which has seen lead-in times for particularly things like chipsets going into vehicles and ICT kit and equipment, meaning those lead-in times are extended. So we've got about 800,000 worth of vehicles which will arrive in the current new financial year rather than having been delivered in the old financial year. Similarly, there's been some slippage around ICT schemes as well. It's important to note that the funding remains available for those schemes that are slipping into this financial year, so none of those schemes are in jeopardy. The funding is still there for those. We'll touch briefly on the estates paper in the fact that there are no major updates compared to the previous PAM report, but I'm happy to take questions on either the budget report or the estates paper, Commissioner.
Just having a quick look at my scratch pad. Yeah, just going back to paragraph 3.2 and the underspend of 310,000. As you mentioned, relating primarily to staff vacancies. I just wonder how many vacancies you've got, and is this impacting on service delivery at all?
So in respect of that, then, on average over the course of the year, we've had about 30 FTE vacant against a staff establishment of over 1,350. So that's a just over 2% vacancy factor. Currently, the figure is higher in terms of the number of vacancies. So the vacancy factor's gone to about 6.8%. We are seeing that the marketplace is more buoyant and competitive for staff roles, and that is presenting some challenges in some of the specialist areas that we have, for example, in ICT and HR. It should be noted, though, that we have got active recruitment processes underway for virtually all of the vacant posts that we currently have. So a process is underway, as said, for all of those. And the recruitment team are now embarking on a number of different approaches to the way that we recruit staff to make sure that we have a better pool of people applying. And they're also setting up some recruitment engagement marketplace days for some of those more specialist areas, as I said, to look to more proactively engage with potential candidates in our communities.
Graham, thank you. And I think it was paragraph 5.1 in the estates report. You talked about the ongoing refurbishment of Heatherset Old Hall. Could you, maybe one you want to pass back to the Chief, but could you, for the benefit of the wider audience, describe how the site's being used for the training of new officers, because certainly as I go around, a lot of people don't understand why we're using the site at all. So I think it'd be useful just to make a comment to explain that.
Chief, I'm happy to pick that up, or if you wanted to lead on it.
Carry on, Pete.
So we obviously did a business case a couple of years ago in respect of Heatherset Old Hall and the development programme that we wanted to put in place in terms of the investment of that and making it into a professional development centre for officers, and particularly leading the way in terms of our provision to support the police educational qualification programme and the police constable degree apprenticeship. So there's been significant investment in line with that business case, and we're into the second year of that. We have, through the L&D quadrant, we've equipped an on-site office for staff and 10 classrooms. There is, in addition to that, a specialist ICT training room that is available for officers to be trained in. We've also invested in some scenario-based rooms equipped with a replica bar, shop and cafe and flat that provide fully immersive training environment as close to the live environment as we can make it. Similarly, the sports hall has been refurbished to allow physical training to be completed on site, including job-related fitness training and taser training. And this summer, we will be setting up the custody centre training area, which will be equipped with 4 interview rooms, 2 ABE suites and cells to professionalise the investigative training environment. Lastly, at the moment, we're converting the old junior school into additional classrooms and a purpose-built environment for the drones training school. As well as those developments, we've also developed the former 6th form block. That is now a large conference suite on the 1st floor and a canteen area for use of the students. Below that, the old barn that is on the site is currently being refurbished to be another space that is available for events and conferences. And this is a really important part of the business case that reduces our expenditure on hiring external venues. And we are seeing that delivering the benefits as we foresaw in the development of the business case. And then finally, we'll move on to business cases that will review the use of the old nursery building and the swimming pool building as well. So predominantly, the site is being utilised at a very high level. The investment, as per the business case, is being delivered over the course of the forthcoming year. The return on investment that we're getting from reducing our spend on those external venues is an important part, and we're delivering on that. And also we are having some external income from public sectors using the site as well, in line with the business case. So we're fully on track in terms of delivering the benefits as we described in the business case, and the utilisation of the site is now very high, and it's delivering a quality venue for the provision of training to our new officers undertaking PCDA.
Great, thank you for that. Just going back to the detail of the officers being trained there, I mean, the Chief gave us a readout earlier on about numbers. What's the wastage rate, the dropout rate from training? Are we going to get the full benefits from the officers going in, or are we finding there's a reasonably, there's a dropout rate?
As I understand it, the dropout rate is quite low at the moment. Chief, I don't know if you wanted to come in there, or the DEP.
Yes, happy to. Commissioner, we monitor our attrition rates very closely through the Force People Board and through our daily through our monthly workforce planning performance packs. Our attrition rate is below national levels. I would have to come back to you with a particular figure, but I know, having tracked it very closely over the last couple of years, it's at a level that we are quite comfortable with. Simon, did you want to come in? Sorry. Commissioner. Simon might have the figure to
So
hand.
bring Simon in, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, Chief Commissioner, I don't have the figure to hand. I think I just want to add a supplementary point as well, actually, that as part of the training, and we are encouraging both trainers and student officers to be self-aware. If the point I wanted to make is that actually, as the Chief says, we are below because we're delivering, in our view, good quality training, but the point I'm making is don't look at attrition as all negative, because there's some people that during that training period and during that probation period that realise they're not right for the service, and we thank them and allow them to go. And equally and quite robustly, if individuals are not right for a whole range of reasons for us, we'll invite them to depart as well. So we're in that space. So the point I'm making is that there is some positives around making sure we've got the right people transiting through their training into being police officers proper.
Yes, the positive I think I'm getting from it is that we seem to have a less than national average attrition rate to start with, which must in part justify the Heatherset concept.
Yes, Commissioner, we are lower, but I'm making the point that it's not always a negative to lose people.
Yeah, no, I understand that as well. Great. I don't think I've got any more questions on that bit. Thank you very much, Peter. Let me just scroll on through. I'm just quickly whizzing through the report. Actually, yes, page 33 I'm at. I'm jumping between two screens, so forgive me if I've raced ahead, but there is... I've just lost it again. Why is it doing this? Sorry, I'm being defeated by technology. There we go. Page 33, there are some bullet points there, which I had some queries on. The report showing that there's small decreases in all reported areas of the last public perception survey compared with the previous reporting survey. And I just wondered why that might be. And there were two that I particularly pulled out. The second bullet, 80% have confidence in their local police. And I wondered whether the problem is not that the percentage is reduced by 3%, but actually turn the coin the other way up, that 20% of respondents suggested they didn't have confidence. And then going to the last bullet, 36% of respondents not believing that the police understand the issues affecting their communities. And I wondered if you could just comment on that piece.
Commissioner,
on this. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Nick, over to you.
Commissioner, if I may. So equally, if I could just make some observations of it in terms of turning it on its head. So, I mean, these are perception surveys. So, of course, it's about a member of the public's perception. And, of course, with perception as a consequence, it's not necessarily their experience, but our communication and our engagement with the public in general will obviously clearly influence that perception. So it's really vital that the constabulary has a really good communication and engagement strategy and plan to support and assist with members of the public kind of in respect to that survey. I think the other thing I would just say contextually, of course, is these are small minor decreases in what otherwise are pretty strong, actually, kind of perception percentage ratings, 86, 80%, 83, 89%, 98%. I get the ones around 64% not only feeling that the police understood and your point there, but they are very much those perceptions issues. And of course, perception is affected not only by what's going on in Norfolk, but what's going on globally, nationally and internationally. So I suspect that the media reporting that we see about events in London, so Charing Cross Police Station, Child Q, Wayne Cousins, other parts of policing in the UK will probably influence people's perceptions about what goes on locally in policing, even though actually it's somewhere else in the UK. So I did think it's important to make that point, I think, in this meeting, but also to members of Norfolk's communities kind of listening to this recording. But I think the key here is we have a communication and engagement strategy which is set last year and runs for a 5-year period, and that sets out in details our approach to trying to keep Norfolk communities informed, and that we have a visible and accessible policing service, which of course is important in terms of your crime and policing plan that we are obviously responsible for delivering and due regard to. So I run and oversee the communication and engagement strategy, and have a board with the right subject matter experts internally in that to make sure that the delivery plans are meeting that strategy and in place. Just some highlights then, really. So we've recently, through precept and OBB processes in terms of our planning cycles, have been able to secure some local community engagement officers to support our police officers on the ground in those local districts in terms of getting the messages across, better communicating and engaging with the public, in terms of telling the public what we do and how hard the officers and police staff members are working on their behalf, delivering a local policing service. So we're really encouraged by those officers coming on board. We've recruited them all now. I think the final one's in vetting, and they will be supporting us deliver the best possible digital and physical world kind of engagement and communication plans to help communicate what we do as we possibly can. So I think that's a really helpful development that we've got ongoing, and we're excited at what that will look like as that matures and comes online, and seeing what impact that has in terms of the perception survey. And of course, we would want that to obviously have a positive impact in terms of what we see here. Linked into that is these headings that you've got in that survey that you referred to. They do form part of the delivery plans that we've got under that strategy. So, you know, what activity can we undertake to be able to support these particular things, to see if we can drive that more positive kind of reporting back that comes back. So those delivery plans are delivered by the local district superintendents in each of our districts across Norfolk. So real engagement with our local police leadership, who have the local officers and the local neighbourhood policing officers who are actually delivering the service. So they're very much invested in that, so that we're coordinated. We've already referred to the Street Safe scheme earlier in this meeting. The public's really enthused with that, and we've absolutely incorporated that in what we do in local policing. So that forms part of our tasking and coordinating group functions at district level and at force level. The public are telling us where they're feeling unsafe and what the issues are. We're analysing that. We are making sure that local officers are aware of it and feeding that into their problem-solving plans. But we're also talking with our local partners, because many of the things that the public are reporting to us in terms of that Street Safe tool are actually environmental factors and to do with street lighting and litter and rubbish and graffiti. And of course, you know, working with our partners in local authority, that's where the partnership has the biggest place to be able to support the public in terms of those issues. So that's well and truly mainstreamed now. On the back of that, in terms of making sure that our staff understand the importance of it, in terms of that visibility and access and engagement, and the importance of actually, you know, getting out there and speaking with local people, dealing with local community issues. We've got the Park Walk Talk scheme. So officers are encouraged, and it's actually part of their briefing and their patrol pattern, to park up in hotspots and places of high footfall, engage with the public on foot, talk to them, understand what the issues are locally, explain what they're doing locally. And that's very much mainstreamed as well now, in terms of ensuring that we actually coordinate that across the county. We have, of course, got those original SNAP meetings, those priority setting meetings, whereby we hold those public meetings both back in person now, but also digitally, so we can have access to more people who might not want to come out after a busy day's work to a public meeting, but happy to sit there having their tea and engage digitally. So we've created that hybrid approach, and we listen to what the local community says they see as the local priorities, and we set those local priorities in combination with local communities, and then develop plans to tackle those issues and report back at the next SNAP meeting. So, you know, a strong reminder of the existence of that mechanism in terms of that local kind of engagement and listening to the public and responding to what they say is their priority. Some of those points in that meeting, so members of the public wanting to be treated fairly and with respect. So work there in terms of the code of ethics. The Chief Constable has obviously launched his new vision and mission and the values for the organisation, all of which communicates to our staff the importance of treating people with respect and fairness. So that programme of work there to make sure that our workforce understands the importance of it will hopefully have a positive impact in terms of experience that the public have, and drive even better performance in terms of this perception tool. The code of ethics, which underpins all that we do, is a real values focused aspect of policing and our culture and our staff. And then, of course, more specifically in terms of the use of coercive powers such as stop search, we've embarked on a whole course of stop search refresher training in terms of making sure that our staff are using, some of our most coercive powers appropriately, professionally, in treating individuals with dignity and respect and trust, in order to be able to actually make sure that when people are surveyed, they feed back to us what we would hope they would do, which is, the experience, whilst ever stressful it was in terms of the coercive powers, they came away from it understanding and felt that they had been treated with dignity and respect. So just a few things that we're doing there, Commissioner, under that overarching communication and engagement strategy that I oversee in terms of trying to drive even better performance than we've got here in respect to these latest survey results.
No, very helpful. Thank you for that. I've got no further questions on that point. Are there any other questions from the floor on the whole of that agenda item? No hands going up. I'm asked to note the report, which I do. So let's move on then to item 6, supporting victims and reducing vulnerability. And that report begins at page 34. Chief, are we back to you?
I think you're staying with me, Commissioner.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, coming off mute. It's with Nick again.
So, Commissioner, would you spare with me whilst I just sort my screen out so I can get the report up, because it's not behaving as I'd hoped it would. So if you notice that I'm just not looking directly at you, it's because actually when I move my webcam then I can do it. It's just the screens are playing up a bit here. Okay, so Commissioner, this is a priority 5, supporting victims and reducing vulnerability. It's an update on the domestic abuse perpetrator partnership approach, the DAPA trial in Norwich. So what I was planning to do with your consent was just give a brief overview and outline and just see if you had any questions as a consequence, if that's acceptable.
Absolutely, yes, please.
Okay, so just some background really, just for the benefit of people listening to this police accountability meeting. So we know, don't we, from analysis and experience, that domestic abuse in Norfolk accounts for approximately 1 in 4 victim-based crimes recorded by Norfolk Constabulary. So it's a real significant issue that our communities and the people that we're here to serve, a number of them have to endure and face. So in a response to that, really, the Constabulary, along with the service, is always seeking to be able to try and develop its service offer, find new ways and strengthen our offer in terms of supporting victims of domestic abuse. And ultimately, they experience some of the most appalling behaviour at the hands of the perpetrators, and including obviously domestic homicides as well. So it's a real significant issue. But in order to try and ensure a holistic approach to addressing this type of offending, we set out a project in combination with your office. This is a joint, principally partnership between the Constabulary and the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, your office, where we might be able to better offer a service to target offender behaviour itself and therefore reduce further risk to the victims in terms of changing the behaviour of the perpetrators. And that's what the DAPA project is in essence testing for us in Norfolk, with a view to being able to develop a business case and an evidence base to be able to, grow it if the evidence base says that's what the right thing to do is in terms of bangs for the bucks in terms of public money. So that joint approach with yourself and your office, obviously dedicated funding by your good self in terms of referring perpetrators to bespoke behavioural change programmes, and to also fund kind of intervention programs around domestic abuse is what this pilot does. It uses a risk-based scoring system. We use something around frequency, recency and gravity to identify those perpetrators in domestic abuse that present the most serious repeat risk of harm to victims. It also, in addition to that self-assessment work that the small team does using that risk matrix scoring, we take referrals from police officers and partner agencies as well, who might not necessarily be visible to that risk assessment process that I've just described, but nevertheless would benefit from consideration about those perpetrator programs that the DAPA project has got. So once we've identified the cohort individual and accepted them onto the program, then DAPA team will develop a very robust multi-agency risk management plan around that perpetrator, problem solving, thinking about full tactical options that we can do to try and protect the victim from future offending and their family, to disrupt the perpetrator and their behaviour, to reduce the risks and likelihood of them offending, but also then to support the perpetrator to address their conduct in terms of behavioural change programs, to be able to help them to see what their impact they're having and stop that type of offending behaviour. So that's the broad background and the genesis of DAPA. At the moment, in terms of where we are currently, we've now recruited the roles that the pilot was financed to do. The team is up and running. It's based within the multi-agency partnership hub at County Hall, which is the best place for it to be in terms of access to partners and the information. We've developed the information sharing agreement between 12 partner agencies, adult, children's social care, probation service, mental health, housing authorities and victim care services. So we've got that nicely set up and sorted out. And we've been starting to take referrals in respect to the cohort of individuals that we're seeking to deal with. And at the moment, we've probably got about 50 perpetrators identified. It's fair to say that the majority are in Norwich at the moment. In terms of the maturity of this pilot, but we're working in terms of how we can develop that across the whole of the county. So in addition to that cohort of 50, there's a drop-down list too, and there's 62 individuals on that drop-down list at the moment that we continue to monitor, but that they've either been successful or actually their behaviours are such that they're not prepared to engage with us. So we just talk to them in terms of disruption and protecting the future victim. But overall, we anticipate at any one time, once we're fully operational, that we hope to have about 100 individuals on the books managing those individuals in respect to the pilot. So I think next steps for us, really, it's been a real challenging 6 months of the first operation, setting it up, recruiting individuals, sorting out all of the administration of getting the information exchange protocol sorted out, working out actually how it's going to work in practice from theory to actual practical working. We've been learning lessons along the way about how we need to tweak things to make sure that it kind of is delivering what we intend it to deliver. And that is kind of where we are at the moment in terms of the lessons that we've learned. But it's up and running. It's seeking to work with individuals. We're starting to get to a position whereby, you know, we're hoping to be able to start to report on some results. Early days at the moment, I think we've only probably had one individual that's kind of gone through the behavioural change program, but we've learned from that and we've started to think about how we might be able to broaden that out and take that further forward, really. But that's just an overview. The paper's there to be seen, Commissioner, by the public in terms of the full trial where we are at the moment. And I'll just see if you've got any questions.
Just one, if I may. Paragraph 4.2, which I think is on page 38, talks about identifying suitable perpetrators who are also willing to participate. So if I understand that rightly, they have to be volunteers to take part in the scheme. Do we think that once the scheme is fully up and running, this is something that we might talk to the courts about directing people towards? So as part of their possibly partly out of court settlements, they could be directed to this as rehabilitative a rehabilitative part of their sanction. Haven't expressed that well, but I hope you get my gist.
I do, Commissioner. I think so. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that we recognise that actually, as I said, the majority of those individuals I described are Norwich centric. But do you know what? In the west of the county, in Kings Lynn, you know, there is something like 22% are over there. But of course, what we were finding is it's a Norwich-based programme. So individuals that are suitable to join that programme but come from elsewhere, given the voluntary nature of it and the non-compellability of it at this time, actually a Norwich-based scheme for somebody at Kings Lynn, well, they don't want to travel. So what we are doing, working with your office, is we've been able to recruit 2 further individuals who can provide that behaviour change programme. Once we've got them recruited and through vetting, we'll be able to deal with that specific problem, and therefore the behaviour programme will be absolutely accessible to everybody that wants to work with us in terms of changing their behaviour about domestic abuse. So I think that's the first thing I wanted to say. To your point about working with the courts and compellability, I think that is going to require some considered thought and detail. And the reason why I say that is because whilst on first approach, it seems to be quite an attractive proposition. Do you know what? We'll get a court order and you will go to that course. What we're really trying to achieve here in this pilot is understanding whether or not we can, in fact, get a true behaviour change programme where the individual actually engages with it at a point where they recognise their own behaviours and they want to work with us to stop that behaviours, but they need that programme and support to do it. And actually, if you can get to that panacea, if you will, then they're more likely to sustain that changed behaviour for the long term, versus somebody who is ordered by the court, who doesn't want to go on the programme, is only turning up because the court said, if you don't turn up, I'm going to put you in prison. They play lip service to it. And they, as a consequence, actually don't sit there, don't engage and don't participate, and actually don't change their behaviour and programmes. Now, there will always be 1 or 2 individuals within that scenario that may learn some things about themselves and actually do change. So I'm not saying that it's not something to explore with the courts. I just caution, I guess, that what might seem on face value to be an obvious and the right thing to do might not necessarily deliver the long-term sustained benefits that this pilot is trying to achieve in terms of delivery, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, let the pilot walk before it trots, before it runs.
And then just on that point, Commissioner, finally from me, if I may, is we've been doing it for 6 months now. We're having to learn lessons about what it actually means on the ground as we translate from theory into practice. And this point about actually, you know, the individual has to want to work with us in terms of the behaviour side of the programme, it does tease out that challenge that you've just described. And therefore, as we move forward in terms of business cases about whether or not the service is sustainable for the long term in terms of future mainstream funding, it might actually become quite difficult actually to kind of be able to turn it from what is a pilot supported by yourself, which is absolutely the right thing to do in terms of testing these things out in terms of service delivery. But if the evidence base isn't there in terms of being able to sustain it in mainstream against all the other priorities that you've got and that we've got in terms of the constabulary with a limited budget, it may become very difficult in terms of a compelling business case. I think the disruption side of the DAPA project, where we're putting in those coordinated disruption interventions in terms of those behaviours to protect the victims that way, I think that's strong, and I can see that will always be strong. But on the behavioural change side of the project, it might become very difficult in terms of the business case and the evidence base in terms of, you know, stacking that up for some of the issues that you've highlighted yourself about compatibility.
Great, thank you for that. Any other thoughts from the floor on this agenda item? See no hands going up. I'm asked to note it, which again, duly noted. Which then brings us on to page 49 and the report on delivering a modern and innovative service. Who's going to lead on this?
Commissioner,
Commissioner.
we're sharing the load today, so it's with PCC Medics now.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, the paper to know. I'll try and highlight 2 or 3 key points and then open for questions, make some general comments and some specific points. As you well know, a real focus on the control room in terms of its ability to handle calls. So we've got clearly with our control room, it's a high volume, high risk environment for us, and therefore we need as an efficient approach with well-trained individuals to respond to. We also know, not least because Commissioner, you talk to us regularly about calls coming into the constabulary and our focus around both the 999 channel, i.e. the need to get to calls as soon as we can, and as we discussed earlier in the meeting, 90% in 10 seconds. But also there's a real focus through a number of our structures around call waiting, handling times through the 101. So clearly, if we don't manage our 101, it potentially silts up and clogs up the 9s because people move from one to the other. What I probably would say is, not least because the CCR has been focus of our attention for a period, we do have good ICT structures. So unlike many forces, we have a system that allows us at the 101 stage to risk assess. So switchboard, we have a switchboard at the front end to allow us to assess calls, switchboard deal with some and then pass them through. That gives us confidence that we're dealing with risk and streaming risk in the right manner. It probably is worth also mentioning, if somebody were to ring on 101, but we deem that to be an emergency, we also have an emergency redirect function so that we can take them out of the 101 into the 999 queue. So when we talk about 999 queues, you've got a 999 queue plus a supplementary of other calls coming through. And the reason I mention that is because we know how precious the 999 queues are for us. And I mentioned that more generally because we have invested in that system that allows us to do that. In terms of volumes, the paper highlights the background of where we are and that we're now returning to pre-pandemic numbers. And I'd also say, particularly around our 9s queues, or our 9 volumes rather, they are increasing, and they're increasing with a sustained volume. So our 101s are coming down, but partly also, as the paper identifies, because of the provision of other opportunities to make contact with us through the web chat facility that's been developed, but through emailing as well as the ability to contact us. So that's coming down, and 9s are back up to pre-COVID levels, and as I say, sustaining at pre-COVID levels over wider periods. We always have a peak, as you'd expect us to do, in the tourist season, the July, August season, but that peak is now broadening. So it's broadening across the months preceding and post those 2 holiday months, which is, I think, something worth putting into context. We've also spent a significant amount of time ensuring that we've got the right numbers of people, so the right numbers of people in the switchboard function, of which your office and the constabulary have been working on that for a period, and we're now in a better place around establishment numbers and people in the roles. And I'd also say that we've also invested, and again, I'm just drawing out a couple of key facts from the paper, invested in a new system that allows us to far better plan resources. So it's a system. It's called Teleopti. It's a proprietary system that we've brought in that allows us to use data from previous years, call volumes over 15-minute blocks, to allow us to plan in a more sophisticated way the numbers of resources we would need. And I think the paper also identifies that previously, to do that mapping, it was a significant amount of work, i.e. ingesting lots of data, trying to work out what we would need relative to those numbers. This new system that's now been up and running for some months allows us to do that quite quickly. We've also taken over the period of reporting in the paper and slightly preceding this particular reporting period, looked at how do we divert the right calls into the right place. So the paper references the OpSolve team, which takes crime away from CCR and time in terms of recording crimes and taking that off CCR and making sure that they pick that up appropriately. And as I say, and I'll just finalise by saying we're looking at, as we continually do, we're looking at and continually push to do so, looking at other areas of technology, smart diary systems, new functionalities to the software to ensure that processing systems within the control room are as efficient as possible, as well as the auto-populating from one database to the next to save time in the control room. And as it says quite towards the bottom, looking at different ways of exploring video technology, managing radio channels to prioritise work, how to keep, in essence, as I said right at the beginning, high volumes, high risk. We need to keep that particular part of our business running as efficiently as possible because of the demands we place upon it. It's something that's very much on the chief's and my kind of radar in the foreground in terms of making sure that the performance within that part of the business is focused on and supported where appropriate. I'll pause there for questions.
Great, thank you. I think it was paragraph 2.7. Yeah, there it is. The report notes that 75 to 80% of the demand on call handlers can be serviced without actually deploying a frontline unit. And I wondered if that suggested that, you know, a large proportion of calls were not actually appropriate for 999-101. And if that is the case, how do we get the message out there that, you know, what is an appropriate message for 999-101?
I think there's two sides to that, Commissioner. Some of them are actually appropriate for us and just asking for information. Now, and again, part of the system that we've got that helps people, provides information to people who are waiting on the call to look for information themselves on our website and in other places. So some of those are appropriate. Some of it can be dealt with via the phone and just some general advice. So we've upskilled our switchboard with what to offer people and where to redirect them. So I take your points. Policing is, as we know, it's a very visible number, 101. People know, and people know we'll pick up the phone, and it's always on, and we are 24/7. So if people are stuck, they will come to us. So there's some of that. Then which we can divert. There is also a proportion that is appropriate for us but doesn't need a deployment. So that might be speaking with the control room themselves, making contact with officers to make contact with others, making appointments, rather than deploying a resource straight away. And then the remainder of that 25%, because it is a resource that's always busy, our response resource, that at the right time and at the right risk assessment has gone through, we would then deploy a resource. And of course, if it's an emergency, if crime in action, somebody at risk, we will be deploying resource most likely on blue lights to get there as soon as we can within the time limits that we set ourselves. Your second point, so I think there is something about understanding what's coming in and we analyse what's coming in. I think your second point, it's an ongoing and perpetual problem around if others are not in the, other agencies are not there or as accessible, people come to us because they just need some help. And our raison d'etre is around helping people, of course. But there's also that other piece around making sure that people don't waste their time. Now, I'm not suggesting it's a big percentage, but there are people that do ring just because they want to. And then we also deal with those in other ways. So if there are other agencies, we problem solve some of the calls that come in through a problem solving, do an analysis on regular callers, and then manage those in a number of ways, depending on what the most appropriate way is. But of course, and we do regularly, both nationally and locally, remind people of what is and isn't generally a police matter or a police call. So we do it regularly, and we do update the public, and we do it on a national level as well.
Grant, thank you. Any other questions, points from the floor on that agenda item? See no hands. Good. Again, I'm asked to note it, which I duly do. So moving swiftly on to item 8, the Emergency Services Collaboration Update. And I just point out, as I usually do for the wider audience, that the 2017 Policing and Crime Act does place a statutory obligation on the constabulary to collaborate with other services, and particularly in the context of Norfolk, with Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service. And there's a report in the papers commencing at page 56.
Back to me for this one, Commissioner. The report very much speaks for itself, actually, and you'll be familiar with the format. I won't go into huge detail. Paper can be read by anyone as they wish to do so. But the headlines, as you know, we have a strong record of collaboration, particularly with our partner force in Suffolk, with whom we've been collaborating since 2009, but also with other local and regional and indeed national organisations. Through that collaboration, Norfolk and Suffolk have saved a combined £44.8 million, Norfolk's share of that being 23 million since the programme began, and collaboration is a constant, and our efforts to drive further value for money for the Norfolk taxpayer will continue through collaboration in the years ahead. To enable that change, we have primarily two teams that are working hard on this. At a local level, the Norfolk Horizons team continuously work towards improvement, transformation and modernisation of all things that are local policing, local Norfolk only activity. And then for the PAN Force work with Suffolk, the Strategic Business and Operational Services SPOS department manages an extensive programme of change. The report that's in front of you provides an overview of a number of the main projects, but important to say not all of the projects, but the main projects that are being overseen. And probably the main message that I would wish you to pick up from this paper is the scale and extent of the change programme, and to note also that much of the change that we are expected to deliver comes in the form of programmes or projects that are nationally mandated upon the constabulary by, amongst others, the Home Office. A prime example being the Emergency Services Mobile Communications Programme, that being the technology which will replace our existing airwave radio system and is intended to deliver a more flexible comm system that can be used in a interoperable manner by all emergency services. Norfolk is on the tail end of that programme in as much as it's centrally run, and we wait to be directed from the Home Office. There is a significant amount of slippage on that programme at the moment, and in time a significant amount of cost for the constabulary. That cost, important to say, is reflected in our MTFP, but we keep a very close eye on the figures. You will note that the word national exists in front of many of the change projects that we need to deliver, and those national programmes do absorb a significant amount of our change capacity. And indeed, one of the concerns that both myself and Steve Jupp, my counterpart in Suffolk, do have is that our capacity to deliver local change is rapidly filling up, and so this is it's quite possible that we will have to look at making further investment in our change team's capacity just to be able to keep our heads above water on the number of projects that are coming our way. That being said, we do maintain close grip and control over all of the projects. Some highlights on 3.6.1, you will note the Police Education and Qualifications Framework. That is the new entry routes into policing for police officers. The programme for that went live in Norfolk in April, so a month just gone, with our first cohort of new students joining the constabulary under the degree holder entry programme. We have cohorts planned throughout the year, but that particular project is progressing very well, and it's fantastic to see the first new student officers joining us under that scheme. More locally, you will know that we continue to have dialogue with other emergency service partners, primarily around co-locating and joint estate, which we do with the fire and rescue service and the ambulance service. And with the fire and rescue service, it's fair to say that discussions are ongoing with regards to further collaborative opportunities with them. I will probably turn to questions at this point. Commissioner, I think the rest of the paper speaks for itself.
No, thanks for that, Chief. I noted your, I'll use the word concern about the national programmes and whether they would be delivered on time and in cost. And I just wondered what controls you have over these Home Office programmes, or is it just a matter of accepting what's provided when it's provided by the national structure that's providing it?
It really is the latter, Commissioner. As through National Police Chiefs Council, it is fair to say that Chief Constables do raise their concerns about particular programmes when we have them, particularly some of the significant slippage and associated with some of the programmes. ESMCP being a very good example of that, where chiefs have raised their concerns. Important to say, mind you, that in the area of ESMCP, what the chiefs have also said is that we will not accept the product until it is fit for purpose, not least because the radio network is essential for the safety of our officers. So I think it is fair to say that in part because of our standards and expectations being so high with this project, and rightly so, I think that that's a contributing factor. But in direct answer to your question, often we do, whilst we make our representations, we do often have to sit and wait for these products to come to us to enable us to do the local implementation.
But I should look at these as a rich seam of potential cost pressures as we look to the MTFP and budgeting year by year through the comprehensive spending review.
Yes, and with inflation as it is, and with the delay in some of these programmes, I think there's a good likelihood that some of the costs that we do have associated with some of these programmes could increase. I certainly don't see any reduction, and it's something that we need to keep a very close eye on. And of course, again, in the case of ESMCP and indeed many of the other programmes, it means that we need to nurse legacy systems for longer than was ever intended, which in itself brings a cost that the constabulary might not have always been planning for. Yeah, to reassure you, we keep a very close eye on this. It's monitored closely through the Strategic Planning and Monitoring Group. I'm more than comfortable that we are managing the risks. But my big concern, as said earlier, is that the change capacity in the force does get absorbed by much of this, leaving us less capacity than I would wish to sometimes implement some of the changes that I would like to do as the chief.
No, understood. Thank you. Any other points from the floor on this agenda item? I see no hands, in which case let's move on to item 9, emerging operational and organisational risks, which is a verbal update.
And I have little to update on, Commissioner. I think it's fair to say that we are now entering into the busy time of the year for the constabulary in terms of operational. I'm really pleased with how the constabulary has managed significant demand over both the Easter long weekend and the bank holiday weekend that we have just been through. On both of those weekends, we've dealt with significant operational incidents, but well and truly kept the show on the road. And indeed, myself and ACC Davison were reviewing the performance of our control room over the weekend just gone, which has been very strong. and that is particularly pleasing given that bank holidays are amongst our busiest weekends of the year. So operationally, I would just describe the situation as busy, but well under control. In terms of organisational, I think that the meeting that we've just had has raised some of the main organisational challenges facing us, and I probably don't need to repeat them now.
Understood. Just casting my mind back to the last PAM, we spoke about mental health on that occasion. Is there anything in the recent Care Quality Commission report into Norfolk and Suffolk Mental Health Foundation Trust that adds to the concerns we discussed last time?
Well, I'll let ACC Davison come in a moment if he wishes to do so. He leads on mental health for me. But my views would be this. Most importantly, our officers regularly find themselves dealing with persons at point of crisis when police officers are not the most, or policing is not the most appropriate agency to deal with people suffering from mental ill health. And that happens with increased regularity. We do see other indicators of increasing demand coming the way of policing, which again, I think is a consequence of challenges relating to mental health. Missing persons being a case in point, the number of which appears to be going up all of the time. And sadly, and most tragically, we know that the suicide rate in this county is above the regional and above the national. Of course, each of those deaths requiring some form of investigation from us in support of the coroner. So now, of course, you can't necessarily link these trends to the challenges that the Trust is facing as referenced in the CQC report. So for the purposes of today, I would just say that the impact on policing of mental health is growing year on year. It takes us away from our core role. And an effective and well-functioning mental health trust is, in my view, essential to help us tackle these issues. We stand ready to support the trust in any way that we can over the months and years ahead, but we are always keen to remind everyone that our core role is policing, and whilst we're willing to support, of course, as set out in the meeting earlier today, demands upon policing are many, and we do not have the capacity to pick up the demand that the mental health services cannot cover themselves. But Nick, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say. Please come in if you do.
I would agree everything the Chief has said, Commissioner, in terms of his assessment of that. I think just for some reassurance, hopefully, just to say that we are well connected with the Mental Health Trust in terms of its senior leadership team. I sit on a partnership strategic group, a steering group, which is in old money the Crisis Care Concordat, where ambulance, mental health trust, police and other partners dealing with mental health issues and impact within public sector and communities come together with a view to understanding what's going on and trying to ensure that we can improve service, but also ensure that each of us are playing our core part role and understanding the impact that each of us has on one another in terms of when that doesn't happen. So we're well linked in there. We have a dedicated, as you know, Inspector Joe Wormsley, who looks after day-to-day aspects of mental health portfolio. Joe is on an ops group, that steering group oversees and guides and supports. So we're very well connected. My observations is that the Trust has got a good plan in terms of it knows what it needs to do. It's got a plan to get us there, particularly as it relates to the impact and relationship with mental health and policing and their role in that. But obviously the CQC report spells out the CQC's position in terms of the trust behaviour, but it's just not appropriate for me to comment any further in respect to that. But we're well connected, and I support the Chief's observations about I and others stand ready to support the Mental Health Trust in its tasks and journeys ahead.
No, I fully agree with both you and the Chief on that last point. The trust is going to need help to recover, and we need to lean in and give them that help. And like you, I stand ready to support the trust in any way that we can. It's in all our interests that we help them to get to a place that I know they want to be at. So on side with that. Any other thoughts from the floor? That brings us then to item 10, any other business? I haven't got any other business. Chief, did I see a hand go up there?
Yes, Commissioner, I believe we had an outstanding action that we might have missed right at the beginning of the agenda. It related to, it was an action for Nick Davison, and it related to special constables. I think there was a request for a briefing note to come through to you, which I believe we've done. I just wanted to do the housekeeping.
Yes, I have seen the briefing note, which, yeah, Sarah, I probably should have said something in the beginning, but no, the briefing note did come through to me with that, with the response that was required. So seen it, content with it, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Okay, so I panic there. I thought I got away with it. I'm desperately trying to find that paper now, but I found it. But Commissioner, I mean, in short, it was a challenge to say that the Special Constabulary was no longer supporting rural policing just for the public's benefit, because there'd been a drop in the statistics. And what that paper that we submitted to you established was actually the accounting mechanism was not doing what it should have done. When we've actually dug into it and redone that and redesigned it, we've established that actually there's continuing strong support by the Special Constabulary in terms of rural communities and rural policing issues, and that there hadn't been a reduction. In fact, the last 12 months suggested that there were only 307 hours of support. It was actually 2,482 hours. And over the 3 years, it was a total of 976 hours. But again, once we've rerun it and got it right, it had gone up to 1,697 hours of support to rural communities. So actually, there'd been a 46% increase rather than the decrease that I think you were concerned about. So just to provide the context to members of the public who may be viewing this, it was an accounting error. We've corrected it, and moving forward, I hope to be able to continue to report positive support by the Special Constabulary to our rural community.
No, thank you for clarifying that point, and we'll make sure that we put the paper with the minutes of this meeting so that everything's in one place. Good. Any other business items? Are there any other business from the floor? No hands going up. Fantastic. Item 12, date of the next meeting is in the diary for the 2nd of August, starting at 10:30, and hopefully, or as I said, my intent is that this will be a meeting in person at an appropriate venue, which we'll identify. So, by way of conclusion, Chief, I think, as ever, a huge amount of work goes into preparing for these meetings. I'm really grateful to you and your team for that work and for the reports and the information you provided. Thanks very much. And without any further ado,
Commissioner, sorry to interrupt. Could I just borrow your meeting link and just keep the chief officers on this line? I just need to talk some logistics for the rest of the week, if that's okay.
Delighted. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. If everyone else could stay on, we'll probably need to cancel the recording.
Yeah. Can we just turn the recording off, please?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, thank you very much.
No, pleasure as always.